firstly, thanks for taking the time, to talk to us today. We are all very excited to hear what you have to, talk about today, right? And for the, so this is the third edition of SaaS Chat, and it's been hosted by Rev Sales and SaaS Insider. So we've had, two sessions earlier, and for today's session, we thought we'll have something around customer success and ongoing trends in customer success. Um, I don't think you need an introduction, but for the newer CS professionals here, Ashwin has over 18 years of experience from a variety of industries, both product and service companies. And after a long stint with McKinsey and Company, where he was consulting for companies on their marketing, sales, and transforming their customer experience, he's now with Gainsight for the last 6 years now. And being the chief customer officer at Gainsight, he's key person in driving decisions across the entire post-sales functions at Gainsight, and he's been instrumental in making like key strategic decisions to drive customer success both at Gainsight as well as he's been a thought leader and promoting customer success globally in various other companies as well, right? And just a heads up, so recently he's authored the book The Customer Success Professional's Handbook. So probably Ashwin, you can talk to us about that as well. So it is a must read book for anyone looking to join and enter the CS function, as well as for senior leadership. So so we have books for sales, marketing, and even for developers, but for the customer success function, since it's a continuously evolving role, this book is a first of its kind, and it covers real world examples, tactics, and of driving revenue and retention, building a CS function from scratch, and other numerous proven strategies for CSMs. So over to you, Ashwin. We look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. And can you hear me clearly, by the way?
Yes, loud and clear, Ashwin.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm excited. In addition to my daily job of obviously managing the team and our customers and making them successful, I love talking to folks who are interested in customer success, either now or practicing right now, or maybe in the future, and just sharing learnings from what's going on in the industry. So thank you for giving me the forum, SaaS Insider and Rev Sales. Cool. All right. Should I share my screen? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that would be okay.
Okay, awesome. Let me know if you can see my screen in full screen mode.
Yeah, we can see it in full screen now.
Okay, great. So I think the idea is another 30 minutes or so. I want to walk through just big trends that we are seeing in the CS space, and then maybe leave another 30 plus 45 minutes at the end for Q&A. Is that right?
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Cool. All right. Let me go ahead. Thank you for that really sweet introduction, SaaS Insider Rev Sales team. I have a 5-year-old at home, and we've got another one coming on the way. So she's definitely the toughest customer that I work with in our business. My release outside of work. Obviously work at Gainsight. I worked at McKinsey in the past. And then when I'm not at work, I'm on the board of a not-for-profit in the Bay Area. And also play the bass. I started back in college in India and now continue playing even to this date. So that's my release outside of work in that sense. And I was born and brought up in Bombay, lived there for a big chunk of my life, moved to the Bay Area, to San Francisco about 10 years or so back, and still have all my roots and all my family and my wife's family in India. So strong connections. And almost half of Gainsight, the company, and our employees are also based out of India. So the lots of connections back to homeland. All right, so let me talk about the trends in customer success as we are seeing them in 2020. The big thing is, like, I want to say 2 or 3 years back, maybe even 5, 7 years back, customer success started in SaaS, software as a service, or cloud companies. But since then, we are seeing several software companies, even the ones that are on premise, who are not in the cloud, also adopt customer success motions. But actually, even more interesting are software companies that are um, uh, beyond even software. Companies that are even beyond software are adopting customer success as a profession, as a way of running the company, etc. So companies in the healthcare space, in the payroll space, in industrial automation, Uber Eats, which is in delivery and logistics. So a lot of companies are now stepping up into that customer success space. When customer success started a few years back, the big three things that CS companies were, or CS teams were focused on, was obviously retention of your customers, as retaining as many dollars as possible when it comes up for subscription, making sure they adopt different parts of your product. If you sell multiple products, then making sure adoption of each of those products was important. And then visibility and efficiency for the folks who are in the front line working with customers, right? You have multiple sources of data, you are doing a lot of manual activity. How can we automate all of that and give visibility into what folks are actually spending their time on? So that's where customer success started a few years back. The more leading edge companies in the last year and this year are focused on the bottom three. So one is efficiency, especially because of COVID. Companies are doing more with the same or more with less. And so how can you give more efficiency to your teams internally? The end-to-end customer experience. So customers buy your product or service for a reason. How do you capture that reason or that outcome in the pre-sales cycle and extend it into onboarding and post-onboarding in the post-sales experience? Tying that end-to-end experience is a big part of what companies are trying to solve. And then expansion. So going beyond retaining customers, how can you make sure that you are cross-selling multiple products that you might have, or features that you might have, or services that you might have, in addition to retaining customers? So it started off with the top three, extending to the bottom three. And we see the growth also in customer success as an interest, as a profession. We host our annual conference every year, and this year we went virtual. So a good benefit of that was obviously having folks who would otherwise not be able to make it in person all join remote, right? So that was the latent demand for a conference, which we were able to unlock some silver lining to everything being virtual and the world that we currently live in. And then we obviously write our books. We wrote the first customer success book almost 5-7 years back. Since then, we've written 2 more books this year. The first one, the one in the middle, was one that I had the opportunity to author. Came out in the beginning of the year. This was essentially the flow that we've been following is Why Customer Success was the book that we wrote a few years back. And then the Customer Success Handbook was meant to say the how. Now that you're bought into the why, how should you run your day-to-day operations if you're in the business of CS? And then we just recently released a new book by our CEO and ex-COO, which is How Will Customer Success Evolve Going into the Future? So we're seeing a lot of readership and followership, even for the thought leadership that we put out. And when we look at what are companies actually doing when we talk about customer success, I want to say 5-7 years back, it basically started as saying, you've got a support team, a customer support function. Let's see if we can do certain things consistently within that support function, which then moved up to number 3, which is usage and adoption, to say, in addition to just waiting for support tickets to be open, can we look at usage data and telemetry data and adoption data to say, can we proactively think about which customers are doing well and not doing well and start approaching them proactively? Last couple of years, it is now moved to the buzzword called outcomes, which is basically saying, you bought our product for a reason. Are you actually getting that reason checked off? Are you getting value from the product? You're paying us a certain amount of money, are you getting value worth that much and more? That was the buzzword and the thing that customer success managers were focused on. The last year, we've now moved to another model, which is more about maturity and stickiness. Like the general argument is that outcomes and value is not a one-time event. You actually need to move your customers through a maturity or a sticky curve. And as they move along that curve, they get more value using your product or service. And so how can you create that journey for your customers, and at different points in the journey, also from your own standpoint, bring in certain products or features in your product that are stickier and are higher value than others. And so that is the general evolution of how customer success has risen up over the last few years. And what COVID has accelerated is this idea of fast time to value. No company today, no customer today has the patience to sit through and wait for months of getting to value. And so how can you nurture them throughout the process? What you see is a screenshot of what we call as journey orchestrator in Gainsight. But the general idea is, even when your customers are going through an onboarding, start nurturing them, give them some tips, etc., for how to use the product while it is being set up. Engage with them throughout the process, both by digital automation, in product automation using what we call as PX, which is product experience. And then in certain cases, at certain points in time, you may want to bring in human beings, and so manual journeys. So how do you combine digital, in product, and human journeys such that you can deliver value to your customers as quickly as possible? That has definitely become top of mind for a lot of companies in the CS space. Also, as you think about creating the journey for your customers, there will be scheduled events, which are all the events, the examples that you see on top, which are things that you can control and can set up on a time horizon based view. But there'll always be unscheduled events around project delays, increase or decrease in usage, or NPS, Net Promoter Score survey responses, license utilization, your key sponsor leaving. All of those you cannot plan for, they're unscheduled. But then how do you layer that in so that everyone in your company understands those risks and the unscheduled events and reacts to them in the best possible way and in a consistent way? So you need to create the journey, including both scheduled and unscheduled events. And so the way to make this happen in companies is what we're calling as a playbook to thrive. And this is, we've often talked about the idea of customer success is greater than just your CSM team. And to make that happen, there are at least 3 functions within your company that you need to align. There are other functions that are also nice to have to get into the CS muscle. But if you have limited time, these 3 teams definitely need to talk to each other and combine forces. And so the first one that I'll call out is between sales and post-sales. There are typically 3 processes that you need to nail. The first one is the value handoff or the outcome handoff of identifying outcomes in the pre-sales process and then translating that into the post-sales process so that the customers don't have to repeat themselves to your onboarding team, services team, support team, CSM team, etc. And then the renewals motion, which is when customers are at risk, how do you collaborate with each other and make sure that the renewals are successful? Same with expansion. How can the CSM make sure that you are talking to the sales team about potential leads during expansion and pass those leads back to the sales team, or execute on them if in your company CSMs also manage expansion? CSM and product, this is one that I'm particularly passionate about. It's almost like saying what sales and marketing were a decade or 2 back as the power couple. The new power couple in town is CSM and product. CSM and product, if you combine forces, can definitely lead to a lot better customer satisfaction, a more efficient way of driving adoption, etc. Your product, I often say product is the best CSM or the most scalable CSM possible. And so those 2 teams definitely need to combine forces. Product teams can definitely give very granular telemetry, usage data, analytics data back to the CSM team so that the post-sales functions can do their jobs better. And CS teams can give information back to the product team on feedback from customers, in-app engagements that they can drive, which then leads to better adoption of the product that the product managers have created. So lots of good synergy that can happen between these two functions. And then product and sales collaborating on, if your product has like trials or freemium type models, then driving product-led growth is a big buzzword in the software industry right now. And so product and sales combining forces to drive growth from those types of models is a big area for exploring. And along this entire spectrum of those three teams collaborating, customer experience and scale is a big thing that you need to solve for. And so what we've done is try to create our products that align along these three journeys. So renewals optimization is a product suite that Gainsight has that basically helps with renewals, expansion, value delivery, capturing values in the pre-sales process, etc. Your CS platform helps CSM and other functions in the post-sales world manage customers. And then PX helps the product teams chart better products, understand usage and analytics much better, do in-app engagements, etc. And then customer experience for closing the loop on surveys and voice of the customer, and journey orchestrator to do at-scale outreaches. So that's how we've created the customer cloud for all things that you might need within your company to work with your customers. Because of COVID, a few things that we started doing was also going back to our customers and prospects and talking to CEOs and CROs and CCOs about how they are thinking about retention and expansion forecasting because of COVID. And what we saw was we did one back in February, March, when things were shutting down because of COVID, and another one back in May to see if things have improved. But in general, what folks were seeing was back in March, depending on what your ACV of your product or service is, customers were expecting gross retention rate to drop significantly for smaller ACV products, almost 17%. And even for your 100K plus, they were expecting almost 6% drop between what they thought they were going to do at the beginning of the year and then March because of COVID. That has improved in May. So maybe folks were more conservative in March. Things are still quite bleak in terms of how the retention is going to trend for the rest of this year. Things are improving in a lot of countries, but several other countries are still struggling, and companies and verticals are still struggling. Even with net retention, which includes gross retention, but also includes expansion, similar story, expansion buckets are opening up for a lot of companies, but they're still down compared to where the annual plan was at the beginning of the year. We asked CEOs what was top of mind for them, and a big, if you see the first couple, they're all about churn and churn forecasting, which makes sense because during COVID, new business and new ARR growth slowed down significantly. And so the best cash flow engine that most companies had was retaining their customers as much as possible. So preventing churn and churn forecasting is definitely top of mind for almost all CEOs that we talk to. And then a lot of companies are planning for the future. Let's understand product usage. Let's invest the time right now so that when the markets do open up and customers start doing better and prospects start doing better, we at least have a much better foundation of product usage and adoption so that we can start talking about expansion and retention in a much bigger way. So if you think about these four, these are big things that companies are thinking about. And so I wanted to call out a few examples of what leading edge companies are doing in this whole world of customer success. So I'll call out Adobe, has a huge presence in Gurgaon as well, and in the US. And like in general, what they've been starting to do is drive if you've used Adobe products like Photoshop, etc., a lot of their products are very self-service. And so they want as much scale as possible in the product. And so what they did using Gainsight PX is basically run A/B tests for new features that they're launching. So imagine a new admin logging into a new admin console And that administrator will get, for some cohort of customers, they get a certain walkthrough guide using Gainsight PX. And for certain other customers, they get a completely different walkthrough guide. And based on the A/B test, that Adobe knows which walkthrough guide and in-app engagement resulted in better usage of the product itself. And so because of that, running multiple experiments in that fashion, they were able to get better design in the product and hence improve their usage of the product by almost 300%. That information is now being passed back to the CS team so that the CSMs can take better action based on that product information data. So that is how they're bringing CS and product teams closer and driving better value and adoption for their products. So this is an example of how they were able to use that in-app guide to actually take 10% of the users that completed that guide. Of that, the 70% of users who converted hadn't used that feature in the last 12 months. So because they were able to show those very contextual in-app messages to their customers, they were able to drive that adoption of that product. Splunk is someone who's doing that end-to-end customer experience incredibly well. So what they were able to do, it's barely visible in this chart, but what they were able to do was capture customers' maturity model and the outcomes that they want from Splunk in the pre-sales process. So imagine that your account executive and your sales engineer in the pre-sales process capture that information. By clicking one button, that got translated into a success plan or an account plan in Gainsight, which their CSMs can then take on and say, I know exactly why you bought Splunk's product and what your objectives are. And now I'm going to work with you on delivering those specific objectives and not going to ask you what you want from Splunk. So there is from a customer standpoint, that experience works really well. And from their standpoint, it's also a fast time to value because now everyone is singing from the same sheet of music, if you will. And there are no balls dropped. And so that fast time to value is now resulting in increased expansion, both from faster expansion, but also the ASP, the average selling price of that expansion increasing because the customer perceives additional value and quick time to value. What they're now doing as an extension of that is to say, for the customers that don't have a CSM, can we do the success plan in the product itself? So assume that you bought Splunk for the security product, then I will show you messages in the product that are all about security, about malicious DNS or inactive account activity, like everything related to security. So that way you're not being shown generic things in the product. It's highly contextual based on why you subscribe to Splunk. So this is their next evolution to say, how can you do more self-serve in the product itself? And then Tableau is another one that does the blueprinting or maturity model really well. What they've started doing is basically classifying, obviously with Tableau and BI, you can use BI for as simple as like reporting or as complex as annual planning, etc. for your companies. And so what they've started doing is benchmarking their customers to say, where are you on the maturity curve and what do you need to do to move up that maturity curve? And all of that is captured in success plans in Gainsight, which the CSMs then drive their customers in business reviews and other interactions to keep pushing them up that maturity curve. As you do more in the maturity curve and as you move up the maturity curve, you use more sticky features in Tableau as well. So it's a win-win for the customer to get more value and Tableau to get more penetrated within their customers. So this is, it's definitely an area that Tableau is investing in. The other end of the spectrum, so for your extremely low touch customers, 8x8, which has a lot of telecommunications and voice over internet type products, a long tail of really small customers that you cannot service with just human beings. So what they've been able to do by using the automation and journey orchestrator in Gainsight, combined with certain AI tools like Conversica, what they've been able to do is manage about 80,000 renewals or interactions with their customers and resolving them, taking that work away from their support team. Their support team was being involved in a lot of how to type questions. They've taken that completely out of the support team's plate and have completely taken that in a digital world by email nurturing, and like how to guides, etc., that are sent by email every time they see a particular customer struggling with a part of the product. So that way, you have a lot more scale that you can get within your customers. Awesome. So those were a few ideas. I know I'm a little over, so I'll rush through this. I wanted to call out a couple more things, and quickly reviewing a couple more things when it comes to what we believe in at Gainsight. So oftentimes folks in the CS world, because we are doing so many different things, it's often, I feel like this, but I also see a lot of my colleagues and CSMs in the community going through these motions of like, what am I doing? Am I right for this job? There are days when there are a lot more churns than you would expect. There is an unexpected churn. There are customers complaining. It's often you are in a position where you're talking about like, am I adequate for this job? What and WTF am I doing with my life being in this profession? I want to tell you as part of the community that it's okay to feel like that at certain points in time. We all go through the same motions, and this is why we started talking about like, what is the purpose for us as a company at Gainsight, and as a leader in customer success. And so we started exploring the definition of purpose. I won't read through what Jim Collins, a marketer, defines purpose as, but at the highest level, it is basically, why do you exist and what is the meaning of your company? So for Walt Disney, that was to make people happy. We said we want to do the same thing and we want to understand what we stand for. And so when we started putting stuff together, these are the types of things that came to the top, as like generic things that companies believe in. And we said, actually, let's talk about, can we help human beings around us with what we are doing in the community? We recently launched an initiative called CSU, to take people in the US and people of like minorities and people of color, and give them better opportunities and create internship programs for them. So can we help human beings and the community around us? And so we wrote our purpose as to be the living proof that you can win in business by being human first. We talk about this often. We are champions in the community. We are champions in the CS community, but also in how we think about our customers. And we strongly believe that customer success is fundamentally a human endeavor. You are not selling and managing companies and customers. You are actually selling and managing human beings on the other side. So as if you are a CSM or are interested in the profession of CSM, know that you are dealing with human beings. You will have ups and downs. You personally will have ups and downs. Your clients will have ups and downs. Make sure that you're including all of that in the way you interact with your customers, and give them the benefit of doubt. Give yourself the benefit of doubt when you're feeling low. And we as a community will emerge through this in a much stronger way. I'll leave it at that, and hope I was able to get a lot more of you to think in the human first way going into your customer interactions, starting today and starting tomorrow. All right, back to you guys.
Thanks, Ashwin. That was, really insightful. So even the few slides, like every slide had so much of information, giving, real world examples of customers using, even the Gainsight product to achieve, various, you know, uh, uh, various problems that they have and solve it using the Gainsight products as well. So, you wrapped it up with, saying something about, the CS is fundamentally a human endeavor. And we actually have a question from the audience exactly around that. So they would like to know, what are your thoughts on humanizing the product? So, if you have a more humanized approach within the product itself, you're going to have more retention and stickiness of, the customer to the product, right? So what are your thoughts on, humanizing the way the product is built?
Absolutely. Huge believer in that, which is why like we acquired a company to do that product analytics and do more in the product itself to learn more. Like typically enterprise software sold to a buyer, which would be, call it like the CIO or the chief security officer or the chief revenue officer. That was the key persona within the company that enterprise vendors cared about. Increasingly, the power to retain, the power to buy, etc., is getting democratized within companies. It's actually the users that are talking about whether they enjoy working with a product and whether they want to retain that product or not. And so increasingly that democratization means that you have to not only care about that buyer who's signing your check, but also all the users that are actually making the decision and recommending whether the product be continued and whether you buy and whether you retain the customers. And so the more you can do within your product to humanize it, to make it easy, and actually allow for customers and users to voice their opinions in the product itself, the better the adoption and retention and expansion that you will see within your product. So a huge believer, and things that a lot of newer age companies are already doing out of the box.
Right, right. Thank you for that. So yeah, so we have another question regarding, the CSM and AE structure. So, who owns the, the upsells, and who takes care of the expansion? So, who do you think should own that piece in the customer lifecycle?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it depends on at least two things. One is the immaturity of the industry that you're selling into. So if you think about like support software, if you think about email, like marketing automation, etc., they're very mature industries, have existed for decades now, and your users know exactly how to use any product in that space. On the flip side, like a data science type software is still very new. There is not much standardization. Folks are still trying to figure it out. And like the complete data models, etc., are still evolving. And so that is, call it like a very immature industry. So that is one axis that you might have to think about. And then the other axis you need to think about is your own product complexity. Do you have multiple products? To set up a product, does it take months, weeks, months, years? You can think about like a Workday or an HCM type human capital management type product. It takes months to set it up, right? Very powerful, but it takes a long time to set it up. So those two factors definitely need to play into how you make that decision. If you are selling into a highly mature industry and your product is relatively simple, think about like a company like Marketo or a HubSpot. Your CSMs definitely have the bandwidth and the potential to not only manage retention and adoption, but also expansion. And expansion can be like simple license upsells, or it can be like a brand new cross sell of a new product. Definitely CSMs can take on more of an account management type responsibility if your industry is mature and your products are simple. If your industry is immature and your products are complex, CSMs have to almost be change managers. And so they have to drive adoption, and that takes up a significant portion of your time. And so it's not possible for CSMs to then manage renewals and expansion, in which case sales teams step in and actually manage that process. So you have to decide for your own companies where you stand on that spectrum of industry maturity and product complexity to decide who does that work.
Okay, okay. So you're saying it's both industry as well as the product complexity.
Yep.
Right.
There are other factors, but I've seen those two to be like the meaningful ones.
Right. Right. So, on those lines, so, on a regular CSM's day, between firefighting, churn, bringing about adoption and building a relationship, what do you say is like an ideal CSM's day? How should the split be? Like where the CSM should spend time, on what activities, they should spend time on more, and, how do you think the day of a CSM should be split by ideally?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it evolves. So in the beginning, if churn and firefighting is like a big problem for your customer base and your company, then you can't run away from it. Like that's the easiest way you are going to improve retention. So most CS organizations start with putting most of their energies there. So call it 80% reactive firefighting and 20% like some proactive, starting to look at leading indicators like adoption to start that program. That's where most companies start. You should quickly evolve to a model where you have like maybe 40-50% of your time on firefighting, another 40% or so on proactive outreaches, relationship building, etc., and leave another 10 or so percent to almost do some introspection. Take a step back and say, for the firefighting reactive stuff, what is the root cause of those problems? Is that something that keeps happening again and again? Spending that 10 or 20% of your time to taking that stepping back and understanding the root cause will then help you solve those problems and reduce the time required. Is what you are doing, should that be done by the technical support team? Is product and engineering, do they need to step in and solve certain problems that are causing you to firefight and churn? And so taking that step back and doing that root cause will then eventually lead you to the ideal process, which should be like 80% proactive adoption driving, relationship management, and 20% reactive firefighting. That's the ideal place to be, but you don't get there overnight. Like it's a process. But if you don't do that root cause analysis, you will never get to that point. So take the time to do that as an organization.
Perfect. Okay. The next question we have here is regarding the marketplace that Gainsight has. So it has multiple integrations, right? So folks would like to know which are the marketing automations and CRM automations that Gainsight has, and which in your your thoughts, which do you think like works best for different segments of industries, like which marketing or CRM are more suitable for different type of industries?
Can you repeat that question? There was a lot in there, so can you
Yeah,
say that?
sure. So Gainsight has a large marketplace of integrations, right?
Right.
And in terms of marketing automations and CRM platforms, which CRMs or marketing automations would you recommend based on the different industry types? Like, so for example, if it's healthcare, then you say this type of marketing platform is more suitable, or this type of CRM is more suitable. Is there any classification like that?
I mean, I'm not qualified to give recommendations on
Mhm.
which CRM to use depending on the industry, but
Okay.
we work with Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics, HubSpot, a bunch of other CRMs as well, and marketing automation tools like Marketo, Eloqua, etc. So HubSpot, and
Hmm.
so we connect with all of them if you choose to use any of those platforms. Um, yeah, so
Hmm.
like our job is to make sure that we enable customer success for different functions in their own platforms. And so if we can send you data about the customer health to your marketing automation platform, be it HubSpot, Marketo, etc., then you can take better decisions in those platforms. If we can send information over to either Freshworks or Zendesk or anything else, in the support platform, if we can send that information, then support teams can take better decisions in those platforms.
Right, makes sense. And also in terms of the customer success team working along with the marketing team, could you please share a few examples of some companies who have done it very well? So you shared insight on how the support team and the sales team work and the product team work well with the customer success function. But in terms of the marketing team, could you like share some examples of companies who have done that well?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few different places where the two teams need to combine forces. The first one is, I spoke about that end-to-end outcomes journey. In most companies, marketing, especially product marketing, takes the lead on identifying what are those 5 or 7 or 10 outcomes that your customers get from your platform. And so marketing has a huge role to play in standardizing the messaging, standardizing the positioning, standardizing the outcomes that your customers start with, which then has downstream impact for sales, for CSM, for support, for PS, professional services, etc. So marketing definitely has a huge role to play at the beginning of that funnel. In addition, customer marketing is evolving as like a really important, like install based marketing. Customer marketing is a very evolving profession in a lot of companies. This is not just marketing to drive pipeline at prospects, but marketing to install base to drive better adoption, to drive better advocacy, to drive better expansion within your customer base is definitely something that that a lot of companies are now focused on. Hey, can you give me a quick second? I have a quick emergency at home.
Sure, sure, sure.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Ashwin.
Sorry about that. Daycare and all the morning stuff that all parents have to deal with.
Okay.
Yes, sorry. Yes, so I was saying like customer marketing is evolving. And so how can you drive better advocacy? How can you look at customers that have high usage and high customer experience scores to say, can I drive better outcomes with those customers? Can I have them talk to prospects who are in the buying process right now and talk about how much value they are getting from using your product or service, right? Like, so customer marketing is definitely evolving. And then the third area where I've seen CS and marketing combine forces is this idea of in the pre-sales process and pipeline generation, there is the term called marketing qualified leads or MQLs. This is basically identifying leads for the sales team to close and convert prospects into customers. The same thing is happening with install base expansion within your customers, where CSMs and CS teams are identifying leads for expansion, and we are calling it customer success qualified leads. So because CSMs know customers really well, they know the need for a new product, they know the need for a new feature, they know the need for a new service. If you can identify those and pass that back to the marketing team and the sales team, then they can then run the process of expansion if they manage expansion, which is a huge area where CS and marketing and sales are collaborating.
Right, right. So, so when the CS team works closely with the marketing team for the the customer engagement, reaching out to them for expansion or even sharing information with them, it has to be an even split. Communicating to the clients from different mediums, right? So, what do you think is like the just way of doing it, like not overburdening the customer with too much communication? So how do you think that can be done to make the customer feel comfortable and not overburden them, but to reach out to them in a timely manner?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is why we like the most important thing that you could be doing is making sure that all of these communications are synced, which was I'll tie it back to the earlier question around marketing automation and how do we integrate with those types of products. It's super important because in most companies, these teams run in silos. So marketing runs in a silo, will have like maybe product release emails or certain nurture emails going out to customers. CS teams will have their own adoption emails and adoption in product engagements go out to customers. And then product teams will have their own tooltips and other messages in the product or otherwise in email, etc., going out to customers. So all of these three teams tend to work in silos and have their own outreaches, which basically tells the customer that you're not coordinated and you don't understand the customer well. And so to solve that problem, what you need to do is, this is why we created the product called Journey Orchestrator, which basically combines all of these types of outreaches in a single customer journey. So now you can then start seeing which types of outreaches are going out from marketing, who opens them, who doesn't open them, who clicks on them, who engages with them or not. And if they engage with them, then maybe they go on another path to get more in-app messages, certain interactions. Maybe they go into like a sales process, etc. If they don't engage, then maybe a human being calls them and has a human interaction, right? So you want to map out the happy path and the happy journey and the not happy journey together, so that you can then um, start taking better decisions and better integrated outreaches to your customers.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that. So yeah, so maintaining, all communications in a single platform, and so that all teams are aware of, any communication with the customer. I think that's key to solving that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so we have an interesting question here so for someone looking to enter into the customer success role. What are the things do you think they have to start doing, like researching about customer success or learning about the function? Like, what are the important things that a person who's looking to move into customer success that they should be doing?
Excellent question. I would say start um, even before you start like getting into a CS job, etc. Like start one reading up on. There are several companies. Gainsight does it. There are several other companies that do it too. But like go read through blogs, understand what CS means. Shameless plug, get my book and see if there are things that you can learn from that as well. But just start using language that several companies use in the CS profession. Start being more knowledgeable about what to do with things in CS. Start following, if you're active on social media, start following certain people who tweet or post on LinkedIn and write blogs a lot, and who are thought leaders in the CS space. You learn a lot just by osmosis of like following people, learning, getting alerts, and reading in this world. So that is where I would start. Then, in terms of once you start at the job, like the first thing you should ask is like, what is the purpose of CS within your company? Is it to drive better adoption? Is it to drive better retention? Is it to drive better expansion? Is it to drive better scale and efficiency? What are you trying to do at this? And it changes throughout your company's life cycle, but what are you trying to do at this point in time? Depending on what your team is trying to do, the actual day-to-day activity of what you do is going to change. And so there is no one size fits all for what a CSM should do. It changes based on what the key outcomes are that your company is trying to solve. Let's
Yeah.
assume that retention and adoption is what your CS charter looks like for your companies. Then the first thing you should be doing is, once you start as a CSM, is start talking to folks in the support team. Understand what types of challenges customers come, and if you have the luxury, maybe even spend a week with the support team answering tickets and solving tickets and learning from them, and see what types of issues your customers run into. Talk to your product team to understand like the biggest types of enhancement requests or things that that customers complain about, so that you can be better knowledgeable. Invest time in learning your product inside out, so that you in my opinion, learning your product and being knowledgeable in your product separates like the best CSM from the really good CSMs. And so invest in learning your product. Don't jump into customer success management from day one. Spend at least a couple of weeks learning your product, learning types of issues from support, etc., so that you're better equipped to be a better CSM. Once you do start your CSM work, spend all your time, if you have a portfolio of 10 or 15 or 100 customers, spend your time talking to a few of them to learn. And maybe even like you can play the stupid card when you are new to a relationship. You can ask the most basic of questions and get away with it. Use that opportunity. Go talk to them about how critical is your product that you sell at that customer. If tomorrow, like, are you getting the value out of the product for the amount of money you pay? ask those maybe controversial questions, which will then allow your customers to give you really honest feedback about whether they're getting the value from your product or not. And if not, why not? Because that is important for you to know, because then you can go and solve those and drive the adoption within your customer base. So invest the time upfront before you do the regular CSM's job. It'll pay you dividends in the back end for sure.
Right. Right. I totally agree with you, on that, Ashwin. So I myself, started out with the technical support function. So that's when you get to know more about the product as well as directly hear from the customers on their issues. So I totally agree with you on that point.
Yep.
Right. So actually, the audience would like to know your recommendations on other books. Apart from the handbook that you've written, can you suggest other authors who've written about customer success? What are your recommendations?
Yes, happy to maybe send a follow-on
Hmm.
email. Like we have a list of books we recommend to new chief customer officers or new VPs of product, VPs of CS. So I'll definitely share that as a follow-on.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Ashwin. Yeah. So, anyone else who's interested in that list, we'll share that list with you after this. And so we have a question here, Ashwin. So we know that Gainsight PX is used like to measure the engagement within the product and all, right? So
Yeah.
product driven analytics. So how do you think that is? Can you like share some examples of product product driven, like analytics driven product management?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the evolution of product management as a profession as well. Product management typically started more as an art rather than a science, but increasingly more product managers are becoming data driven and analytics driven in the spirit of the question. So they are using things like what is the click path? How much time do folks spend on a particular page? What is the customer effort required to execute on a particular workflow within the product? They're starting to ask those types of questions and using products like PX, but there are several others as well, starting to actually map that out in the product. For example, you want a particular workflow that you had in mind as a product manager of click here, then click there, and then go to this third place, fill in certain things, and then click save, right? You have a workflow in mind that you want your ideal customer to follow, ideal user to follow. People have mapped that out and then seeing how many people actually follow that type of an approach, and then see where folks lose out, and then that helps them create the next version of the product, include that in the roadmap, but also then create engagements in the product or walkthrough guides in the product to enable users to follow the most prescribed path, the most happiest path that they had in mind, the vision that they had in mind when they created that product. So the more forefront PMs are definitely investing a lot of energy in doing that. Adobe is doing an incredible job of doing that. Seismic, I know, in the content management world is and knowledge management world is doing a lot of really good stuff in that regard. Even Gainsight PMs in our Hyderabad office and Bangalore offices are doing a lot of work with new products that we want to launch and product roadmap decisions that we are making. They're actually using PX internally to know how customers are using Gainsight's products. And are they following the happy path? Where are they spending their time? Our product team has launched an in-app survey. If you stay on any particular page for greater than X minutes, we launch an in-app survey that says, how difficult was it? It's called a customer effort score, but how difficult was it to achieve what you wanted to achieve on this page? I'm paraphrasing the question, but that then is a 7-point scale, which then the product team uses the product manager for that particular feature will use that data to say, how difficult was it? And then dive into what was causing the difficulty using the analytics data, and then make decisions for what to do to reduce the complexity.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, moving on to the next question, Ashwin. So this is around managing retention for enterprise clients. So usually enterprise clients take a larger, longer time to onboard and adopt the product. But once they are set, they don't churn that fast or move to a competitor that fast. So what do you think is the approach in managing retention for enterprise clients?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it is similar to the Splunk story. If you heard that, like I would say, um, like making sure that there are things that you can do while they're getting onboarded and it takes a long time to do it. Can you do something throughout that journey? Is there a quick way to nurture them through that process so that they feel the sense of value sooner? Maybe it is like like a small part of your product that the enterprise customers can start using, but it takes like days or weeks to set up as opposed to months or a year to set up. And can you get them hands on keys as quickly as possible? If you cannot do hands on keys as quickly as possible, can you at least do like maybe sharing thought leaderships, sharing articles, sharing how to, sharing benchmarks, all of that type of stuff, so that you are giving not the product value, but maybe additional value outside of the product, so that they feel the sense of time to value being as little as possible. So those are things that you can do upfront. I would say, given in most enterprises, like you're not churning them at a pretty high rate, the second part that you could do is you may not churn the logo, you may not churn the enterprise customer altogether, but you might contract in revenue because they don't use certain parts of your product, because you may sell four different things to them and they may churn one out of those four things, which is also a reduction in cash for you as a company. And so maybe the definition of retention that you need to change for enterprise customers is product level retention or business level retention or business unit level retention, as opposed to customer retention. And so start thinking about like what leading indicators you can use for individual products or relationships that you might have. And then finally, if retention and product level retention is also not the issue for you, then maybe what you need to do with enterprise customers is how to unlock expansion as quickly as possible. So what can you do to combine forces with your sales team to expand within enterprise customers? In general, our belief is if you're not expanding, then you are churning. It's just a time. It's just a matter of time before they start saying, "Oh, we just use product X or company vendor X in a very small way, in a very small team within the company. Maybe we should consolidate all of this within another platform." Right? So the it's almost like offense is the best form of defense. Start creating joint account plans, success plans with your sales reps, so that you can drive more expansion, which basically means retention becomes a non-event. So it depends on your business. All three things I would say are important for enterprise customers: fast time to value, retention at the product or relationship level, and expansion as the better form of retention.
Got it. Got it. So Ashwin, so what's your take on the NPS surveys? Do you think that's the right approach?
Right approach for
To measure, the customer loyalty?
yeah, I mean, it's not the only approach, but a lot of companies do believe in NPS. And one big reason for that is it is simple. It's just a simple question.
Mhm.
And the fact that there is a lot of benchmark that you can compare against. There are several other ways you can start measuring loyalty as well, but NPS definitely helps you with benchmarking yourself and where to improve. And it is a simple enough thing that you can launch very quickly. So there is a lot of value to NPS. There's also a lot of research that has shown that NPS doesn't, in the B2B world, in B2C, it definitely translates to retention of an individual. But in the B2B world, NPS is correlated to expansion a lot more than NPS is correlated to retention. Customers stay because they find value from your product, but they buy more and expand their relationship because they also enjoy and they're loyal to your business. So there's a lot of value to NPS, but it's not the only solution.
Makes sense. Okay. The next question is around segmentation of clients. So how best do you think, from a strategic viewpoint, how should the clients, in a portfolio be segmented? Is it based on the industry verticals, the MRR, or the brand value? So how do you think, the client should be segmented?
Yeah, I don't think there is a one size fits all. I don't think there's a single answer. I'll
Mhm.
say like just current MRR or current revenue from customers is not enough. You need to start thinking about, from your standpoint, you need to start thinking about not just existing revenue, but also future revenue. So if you sell to Google and Google pays you $10,000 today, doesn't mean you treat them as an SMB company, because the expansion potential for you within a Google is huge. So you have to start thinking about both existing and future potential at customers. From the customer standpoint, they would like to be treated or segmented based on their needs. So a needs-based segmentation based on their use case, based on like their maturity, etc., are different ways that companies are also looking at. And so it's rarely ever a simple one answer. Like you'll have to take different pieces into account to create your model.
Right. Okay. So the next question is, around the like making the entire organization and not just the customer success function, customer centric one. So the churn is directly tied to like the KPI of a CSM, but how do you think, you can create this urgency and the customer centric approach across the organization? So how do you think we can, bring about this urgency? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good problem. It's a good question. I would say if you can, you should go check out OpenView. So Kyle, I forget his last name. He had a really good LinkedIn post on this, about how churn is not just a CSM problem. He's from Kyle from OpenView, which is a VC based out of the East Coast in the US. You should definitely go read that. I'll say that um, there are a few different ways you can make this happen. Step one, most companies and most people in outside of the CSM within your company probably don't know of reasons. One, the big retention goals that you have as an organization, maybe that's restricted only to the CS team, the CEO, and the CFO. Other functions within your company may not even know the metrics that you're tracking. If they know the metrics, they may not know the reasons why customers churn. So it is the CS team's responsibility to advocate internally and share learnings and data and insights about churn and CSM goals with the entire company. If you have like all hands, if you have some forums where you talk to the entire company, get on that agenda and share on a quarterly basis or an annual basis what your learnings are for the CS business or your retention business. That is step one. Step two, make your organization a learning organization. So if you do send out like an NPS survey, or if you do send out CSAT surveys, customer satisfaction surveys, when the responses come in, very rarely are they only about the CS performance, right? The CSM performance. They'll talk about product shortcomings. They'll talk about support tickets taking too long to close. They'll talk about time taken during onboarding was too long. They'll talk about how sales didn't tell us about certain things in the sales cycle. There's a lot of rich information customers tell you, but those stay within the CSM function and they never make it to the actual functions within the company that can impact those pieces. So make it a point to, one, share all of these survey results with all the people within your company, all the functions within your company, and maybe on a quarterly basis synthesize the results and say 30% of the detractors that responded spoke about product being an issue. So chief product officer or VP of product, what are you going to do to solve this problem? Put the onus back on these different products and give the opposite end of that spectrum too, which is like give them credit when 40% of promoters within your surveys, NPS surveys, talk about how much value they're getting from the product. And then finally, if you want to bring multiple organizations or functions within your org on like to start thinking about customer centricity, start rewarding them. Maybe in your next annual planning cycle, create a budget of $10,000 for gifts that you want to give to non-CS team members who go out of their way to solve customer issues. Maybe a finance person that they did was really polite when it came to a billing issue, or a product manager who jumped on a very escalated customer and solved their customer issue, or engineering that dropped everything and solved the problem because your customer cared about it. Give them some spot rewards, give them recognition. I trust me, you will make a lot more friends within the company and make people a lot more customer centric when you give them recognition for when they go out of their way. So those were at least three ideas, but there are so many more ways to solve this problem as well.
Yeah, makes sense. So yeah, so one other thing that I've seen companies do is that they chat on the channels on Slack. So they share any good feedback or bad feedback from the clients directly with the product team or the engineering folks.
Love it. Yep.
So yeah, so Ashwin, the next question is around measuring customer experience. So NPS is one of the ways we can predict a customer experience or the customer loyalty. But what are the other factors do you think that can be taken into account when measuring, like giving a score of customer experience to a particular client?
Yeah. So we think of a customer health in two ways. It's like a math problem of customer success health score equals customer experience score and customer outcome score. Outcomes includes things like adoption, are you getting value from the product, etc. Experiences, do you enjoy working with our product and the teams that people that you interact with from our company. And so we measure customer experience and we prescribe this to our customers as well. But we recommend that you think of customer experience in a few different ways. The first one is if you have any voice of the customer program. So whether it's surveys, whether it's advisory boards, etc. Like those are ways that your customers give you explicit feedback on whether they enjoy working with you or not. So that is one. The second is in most organizations in the B2B enterprise software space, you do have a technical support function. That technical support function is a really good voice of the customer for you. Whether that is customer satisfaction after a ticket is closed, the number of tickets open, how long those tickets are open, all of those have a pretty important impact on customer sentiment and customer experience. So that is a second measure that you should include, some way of translating support data into the health score. The third thing that you should think about is most people in your company who interact with the customer, be it your CSM, it could be onboarding, professional services, it could be support, it could be sales, it could be executives who are talking to them, it could be marketing. All of them have a view into like a very subjective, not objective, but subjective sentiment assessment. Give human beings the forum or in your health score to say, everything that data might suggest they're healthy, but I spoke to them and I didn't get good vibes from the conversation. Give human beings the ability to have that subjective input as a third part of your customer experience score. So those are at least three ways you should think about your customer experience score. Some data and some subjective.
Makes sense. Yeah. So moving on to the next question, Ashwin. So this is in terms of feature requests. So
Yeah.
how do you think is the best approach to prioritizing feature requests? So sometimes there's this prospect preference, right? So if it's a high value customer, there's more preferences given to them. But how do you convince the product team that another feature is actually giving more value to more number of clients? So what's your approach on that, like prioritizing feature requests?
Yeah, I mean, like you can't escape feature requests for large customers. They pay you a lot of money and they have a pretty high impact on retention and expansion. So there is no escaping doing enhancement requests and feature enhancements for large customers. What best in class companies are doing, and we do it internally at Gainsight as well, is for your smaller customers, giving them the power of unity. So something like a community type product where multiple customers can talk about enhancement ideas that they want from that from your product or service, and others get to upvote or downvote those ideas. That way multiple customers can together add value and identify certain things that many companies care about, which then makes it to the top of the list for your product team to say, this is not one large customer, but many small customers that together add up to become one large customer. And if we solve this enhancement request, it impacts multiple companies. So that is a way that companies are trying to tackle the problem of enhancement for smaller companies. And then we started this process 2 or 3 years back, and it's proving to be really useful, is this notion of a product risk. So like you have like a risk because a sponsor left, you have a risk because of lack of adoption. We started this process of calling it a product enhancement risk for even for your smaller companies. If there is a product enhancement that is completely causing the renewal to be at risk or a large expansion to be at risk, you can fast track that. This is a shake hand process that product and CSMs at Gainsight agreed to. And we said, when we put this into a product risk process, product has to drop everything, look at the ROI of making that change, go back to seeing if this was already on the roadmap and was just coming 3 quarters down that you can accelerate, or if it is the first time you're hearing about it and is not in line with your vision, etc. But there is we get the opportunity to go top of the roadmap funnel for certain cases where that enhancement directly ties to either solving a renewal or solving a large expansion. And those could even extend to mid-market and SMB customers.
Perfect. I love the idea of the upvote downvote option to prioritize features.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hand this over to Hari now, Ashwin. So he has some early stage startup questions, like on a strategic level, how to go about that. Hand it over to Hari now.
Yep, sounds good.
Hi, hi Ashwin. So, I'll be taking over from now. So before that, I'd like to have Vipul talk to you. Vipul takes, I've added Vipul to it. Let Vipul give his introduction and ask his questions to you. Hey, Vipul, please go ahead.
Hi, Ashwin. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, Vipul.
Okay,
hey,
great. Ashwin, I wanted to understand, from an CSM team perspective, how CSM teams can contribute towards a GTM strategy for a particular market. Now we do have, specific customers in, some different geographies, but there are these major markets, like most of the SaaS companies in India have their major market in the US, but there are some customers that you have in different geographies where you would like to expand. So, just wanted to know your thoughts about how the CSM team can help in go-to-market strategies for particular markets, and what are the kind of inputs that they can provide apart from, providing, customer references, G2 crowd reviews. Apart from that, are there any other inputs that you would like to kind of share with us?
Yeah, it's a good question. A few things that I'll call out is, one, CSMs are almost like if you do it right, they could be the forebearers going into new markets or new verticals or new use cases, because what they can do is dive deep into maybe the first 10 customers that you might have in a new region, in a new market, in a new vertical. Deep dive into their use cases, what's working well, what's not working well, what is different about them compared to, call it, the core or the rest of your business, so that you can then start talking about whether there is enough value in pursuing that new go-to-market strategy. So they can be almost your experts before you make the decision to deep dive into a particular region. I wouldn't downplay the references part, like getting references in a new market is so critical, and CSMs can play a pretty meaningful role even in that piece. And then the third thing I'll call out is we started doing this when we wanted to enter the EMEA market for Gainsight, is like actually have an experienced CSM. Obviously now in the COVID world where everything is all remote, it's completely different, but in a world where folks could travel, the CSMs for the EMEA market, for the early EMEA customers would, I moved a couple of them to move over to that region for the first 6 months so that they could immerse themselves completely in the customers, early customers in that area. They started doing advocacy events in the region. For example, they would host like a weekly or bi-weekly like coffee chats and stuff like that, where multiple users would get together and prospects would also get together to talk about everything customer success. So you can do a lot to help the sales team and the go-to-market teams build early wins, understand the business before you make it a real business.
Okay, thanks. Great input, Ashwin. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, Ashwin. Ashwin, Hari again here. So
Hi.
my question here is that, I'll take it from my example. So I'm doing an early stage startup. I'm currently in the beta stages of my product. So if I am to start off with customer success, what would be your advices? Where should I invest on? Or know how experienced should I hire people, and what would be the right stage to hire a leadership for customer success?
Excellent question. I would say, like I said, like the goal of your CS organization changes as the company changes. I'd say like for someone at the stage that you're in, like customer support may almost be more important than customer success. And so this is where we started back in the day as well. And so having someone who can, the most value that you can get out of your post-sales function in the early stages is someone who understands your product incredibly well and translates the product market fit and your customers' feedback back to your product and engineering team. So it's almost like a dual role of customer support and product management to some extent. That's where you'll see max value for your early customer success or customer support people. And beyond that, like as you develop more of a product market fit, you get momentum in revenues and you're seeing some stickiness with your customers, etc. At that point, you can then start saying your CSMs then become like product experts, but then also they are people who are driving adoption of your product, right? So those are the types of people that you then start hiring. As you get into like a really large business, Series DE funded company, pre-IPO company, then you can start saying like, where are your CSMs more, you don't need product experts anymore because there is a general momentum that you have within your business. Now your CSMs are adoption driving machines, and they start acting as like account managers as well in addition. So that's the general transition. So long-winded response to your question, the short answer would be hire product experts, product managers type folks who also have a lot of customer empathy, and their primary job is feeding back to your engineering and product teams how customers use your product, how does that compare to competitors, and what types of product requests do they have to become stickier with you.
Thank you, Ashwin. Thank you for the insights. So I'll put the next question. So the next question is from Amrit, and I'll add Amrit to the call right now, and he can ask it to you himself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't want to take too much of your time, but I said we'll complete by 9:30, and this would be the last question. So we'll wind up with this. Yeah. Amrit, you're online. You can talk.
Yeah, Ashwin. Hi. So I work as a senior business analyst with Freshworks, and my role currently involves a lot of sales support, and also we get involved with customer success managers for customer retention. So my question is, how much of information would you think we should make readily available for CSMs in order to address queries around compliance, legal aspects, subscription related queries, or will having CSM answer these queries actually give them a lot of work in addition to what they already have?
Excellent question. I think there are two things that you're probably mixing there. One is CSMs having knowledge of like associated aspects like compliance and legal and subscription, and whether they answer those queries. Those are two different things, I think, which you included together. So I'll say, having been a CSM at Gainsight and then running the team, there is a lot of value to CSMs knowing the legal compliance and subscription, how pricing works, how product functions, etc. There's a lot of value to them knowing it, because they can then be a lot more holistic about how they approach customers. Having them respond to those types of questions takes away from other proactive things that they could be doing with their customers. And so the more self-serve you can make your customers on those questions by having a portal that they could go to, or enabling other reactive teams within your company like support, etc., to answer those questions, that might be a better ROI on the role itself. And CSMs tend to not, like, that doesn't tend to be a big thing that CSMs end up answering. But I think there is value to sharing that information, because they can then make better recommendation. They can then identify expansion leads in a better way if they understand how subscription works, how the product functions, how the positioning works, etc. It definitely helps them do their jobs better.
Thank you, Ashwin.
Cool. Awesome.
Ashwin, thank you so much for your time, Ashwin, today. And I think with this, we come to the end of the session. And guys, do you have any last questions that you want to ask Ashwin, or shall we wind up? And yes, so we don't have any questions anymore. So Ashwin, thank you for your time, and thank you for answering all the questions so patiently. And please, I think it's way too early in your time. You're from the Pacific Coast. We'll follow up with everyone. We'll share you the feedback, and please share us the resources which we could about the books and for the CSMs. We'll share it with all the attendees here. I think we'll wind up the session, guys. Peace.
Awesome. Thank you, Hari and team, for having me on. Yeah, appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ashwin. Thank you so much.
All right. See you guys. Bye.
See you.